All right, folks, welcome to Wealth Curated. This is the Moto Blog edition, and we are here today with the Don of all things Mustang, Mr. Donald Farr. Don, there's a lot of icons. Well, actually, not a lot of icons in the moto industry, but there are a few. One is Mustang, and that's your thing. Tell our audience who you are, how you came to cars, how you landed with Mustangs, and why much of your life has been about riding and studying and being around Mustangs.
Yeah, I am well attached to Mustangs when it comes to writing about them. I've been writing about Mustangs for over 40 years. I started freelancing back in the 70s, and then latched on to a magazine called Mustang Monthly when Larry Dobbs, not long after he started it in 78, I came to work for him in 80. Wow. And I just rode that wave with him till he sold the company in 99. And I continued with Mustang and Fords and other companies, and did a website called MustangWeekly.com. And today I'm the editor of Mustang Times, which is the official magazine for the Mustang Club of America. So I've been fortunate to get paid to do what I love to do, which is be around Mustangs, be around Mustang people, and write about Mustangs.
It is a very enthusiastic community, right? There's every kind of car maker of note has their car clubs, but there's a few that just have an enthusiasm in their base that's beyond the norm. Porsche's one, Mustang is one. Tell us what the Mustang people are like.
Well, they've changed over the years. You know, when I first started messing with Mustangs in the 70s, a Mustang, I had a Boss 302, and that kind of led me down the path. And we were all very similar. Most of us were in our 20s. We were able to, a lot of us bought Mustangs when they were new, but a lot of us couldn't afford a new car. So in the 70s, they were cheap. You could buy I bought my Boss 302 for $1,600 in 74.
Wow.
So, you know, and they were used cars, but we knew there was something about them and then we started getting connected to each other. You know, when Ford stopped carrying a lot of the parts, we needed each other to fix our cars, and basically that's what we were doing back in those days. We're just fixing them to keep them going. And then in the 80s, they kind of took off as a collector car. So, and as it's progressed to today, Mustang people are, my age group has obviously aged a little bit, but yet there's still younger people and younger people even still who like the newer Mustangs. They like the EcoBoost because they can get less expensive insurance, but it's still that same sporty and pretty quick Mustang.
Yeah. So there's so much to talk about in the auto space these days, EV and EcoBoost and design and so much. But I want to go backwards before we go forward. So, you know, I grew up sort of with cars and bikes in my DNA. My grandfather was general manager of a Jaguar dealership, very prominent one down here in the South. And I grew up around Jaguars and Spitfires and MGs. And my first car was a Spitfire, fully restored from the wheels up, British racing green. Yeah, yellow stripes, was in the shop more than it was ever on the road, but convertible, and at 16, man, it was the coolest thing ever. So, and you know, my uncles and my grandfather had cars and bikes, so it's always been my DNA. And but so I'm curious to hear, you know, in your younger life, did someone put you around cars, or was it something you came to on your own naturally? Or
I think it was naturally. I recall being told that when I was a toddler, growing up in rural South Carolina, near my grandparents, and on a highway that was on a hill, and I could hear the tractor trailer trucks. We're talking in the middle 50s now. You know, either climbing that hill or air braking down the hill, and I would run out into the yard saying truck, truck, truck. And in fact, one of my grandfather's friends called me, my nickname to him was always Truck. So I had a propensity So
Yeah.
wheeled vehicles, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
But but on my own, my parents weren't car people. My dad, to him, a car was transportation, and so. But for some reason, in the mid '60s, probably '65, I would say, which is about as middle as you can get, I started noticing the new cars that were coming out, and especially in the fall of '65 when the '66s came out. You had, I always I loved cars with hideaway headlights and fastback body style.
Wow. Yeah.
The Charger, the Toronado,
Yeah.
the Corvette, those were kind of the cars that I looked for when I was sitting in the back seat of my parents' '60 Comet. But I knew about the Mustang, obviously, and
Yeah.
obviously had noticed that they had a fastback. Didn't have highway headlights, but it really hit me in February '66 when my grandfather bought a new Mustang, a Mustang GT hardtop, and everybody in our little neighborhood just raved about the fact that my grandparents, who were probably in their early '60s at the time, had a Mustang, and I wanted to be seen in the car. I went with them every chance I get to go somewhere, and that kind of put me on the Mustang path.
Yeah, the '60s, we talk about the golden era of automobiles and design and this facet or that facet, but the '60s was really, when you look back on it, a romantic time for car design. Not just American cars, but I mean, some of my favorite cars, besides that '65 to '67, '69 even, Mustang and some of the other American builders, the Jags of that time, my gosh, one of the most beautiful cars ever created, I think, were those '67 E-types and, the XKEs, and '68. It was a magical time for car design.
Yeah, being from rural South Carolina, I didn't see many of those. So, I was kind of stuck with most of the American cars, and and didn't see many in my little hometown. But when we went to bigger towns like Spartanburg and Charlotte, that was, man, I saw them all over the place.
Yeah. So you're a writer now, and you travel to a lot of events, I see, and so you're around a lot of really, really just cool and valuable cars. Which, by the way, I could probably round up about 1,600. Can you find me a boss for 1,600 today?
Maybe the floor pan of one laid in a junkyard somewhere.
Right. Or maybe a model, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing what car values have done, and that's sort of a good segue. We're going to talk about this later. Let's talk about it now. In terms of car value, so did a little homework in preparation for this, and I'm so curious with how the world has developed during COVID and post-COVID, because I'm in rare collectibles across categories. Autos is one of my favorite, but what we've seen in COVID across every collectible category, especially at the very high end, is this massive increase in growth and values of things. You're breaking records every week across cars and motorcycles and rare coins and fine art. So prior to COVID, I did a little homework 3 years ago to see what the top 10 Mustangs were, right? And at the bottom of the top 10 list, Money Inc. had done a list, and the '65 Shelby GT 350 SC was number 10 on their list. '69 Boss 429. This was 3 years ago. It was number 9. Those were each about $500,000. The top of the list, number 1 and 2. Number 2 was the Shelby '67 Shelby GT 500, the Eleanor, and then number 1 was the '67 Super Snake Shelby GT 500. The Eleanor was about $1 million 3 years ago, and the Super Snake about 2.2. How have things changed since that time? Are the values, or if those cars have even traded again? But what have you seen in the Mustang niche?
Well, it's kind of hard to pin it down on those cars because the Eleanor was like really one of one. I mean, they made more than that, but that was like the primo car. So, and since then, of course, another Mustang has topped that, and that was the '68 Bullet Mustang that was driven by Steve Mcqueen.
Right.
3.4 million. But those cars, you know, you got to throw them out the window when you're looking at values. Of course, the 65 Shelby GT350s are still up there at the top. Boss 302s, Boss 429, any Shelby really are going to be at the top of the list. And
Has it always been, yeah, has it always been Shelbys and Bosses? Has there been anything else in the mix that you would say would be a sexy go-to collector car that's not a Shelby or Boss?
Our code 428 Cobra Jet Mach 1, or any 428 Cobra Jet car really. Even the rare ones like 69 hardtop with a 428 Cobra Jet. They even make some Grandes with a 428 Cobra Jet. Just a handful. 289 high performance models from 65 to 67. And coming along a little newer, of course, the Fox bodies are starting to catch on, especially the SVT Cobras and the Salines. So yeah, that's kind of the cream of the crop.
Yeah,
I would say, unless you come to some unusual, rare, you know, crazy color, special paint, you know, you get some of those too.
Any magnificent barn find stories you've covered over the years that are particularly interesting?
Yeah, my friend Jerry Heasley seems to get more of the barn finds than I've been. He's written a number of stories for me over the years. Now he's got his own YouTube channel where he does barn finds. But I guess one of the favorite ones for me that I was a tad involved in was I heard about a gentleman up in Pennsylvania who had a black 64.5 convertible, and he had bought it from the Ford resale lot back in 65, I believe.
Wow.
And drove it for a while, put it in his barn with a collection of other kind of eccentric cars. And he knew all along what it was, but nobody knew that he had it. It was one of the 12 convertibles used at the New York World's Fair on the Magic Skyway.
Wow.
And Ford had, at the end of the season, Ford had taken them off and refurbished them and sold them in their resale lot in Dearborn. So he had the car and untouched, you know, he just still had the bracketry under, and to this day, it's in the Mustang Owners Museum up in Charlotte. To this day, it still has the bracketry and underneath where attached to the Magic Skyway. So I was a little bit, I knew his son-in-law. That's how my connection to it. And they were wanting to restore it. And I said, no, don't restore it. You know, at least bring it out like it is. And they took it to Carlisle, and it was just a smash hit there. And that's where I got to meet Dr. Mansell and interview him and do the first story on the car. So that was, I love being involved in stories like that. Yeah,
that's amazing. You know, in the world of high-end collectibles, you know, as you kind of alluded to a couple minutes ago, there are outliers that, in terms of valuations for most people collecting, you know, they're outliers. Maybe you don't put those in the equation, but those outliers are all about story, right? It's rare, yes. It's beautiful, yes. But at some point, it becomes the story.
Correct. Yeah. Steve McQueen drove this car in the movie Bullet. You know, so that's those kind of stories.
Yeah.
You can't. Sometimes you can't put a value on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's pedigree.
And interesting thing. Those two cars, the Bullet car and the Magic Skyway car, are unrestored. I mean, you look at them and they got rust and they look rough, and you know, the seats are worn and all that.
Yeah.
So they're not like a pristine car you would think would sell for millions of dollars.
Yeah. So I have a car on my website. It's a 1958 Vet Restomod, right? LS3 engine. It's extraordinary. You know, Kevin Hart a couple years ago paid like $800,000 for a 59 Restomod. Our car has 30 miles on it. Absolutely gorgeous. In the Mustang space, I'm curious, what's going on in terms of the Restomod mentality? You know, you got people who pay a lot of money and like something that's done really well. Others, we just mentioned the originality of those two cars. Some are like, if it's not original, it has no value to me, but they're selling for a lot of money. Are you seeing similar things in the Mustang space?
Oh yeah, it's been going on for quite some time, probably since the late 90s. The Restomod kind of got going with just updating older Mustangs with stereo power windows, tilt steering and all that, but it's evolved into a lot more of that. I was just down in Paris, Florida, to photograph a car that had appeared at one of the MCA, the Mustang Club of America national shows, and he had found just a 70 Mustang fastback, rusty, rough, 302 two-barrel automatic original car. So it really wasn't value there to restore the car to original. So he took it and he put a John Kazi Boss 429 in it, performance automatic transmission, just made it the way he wanted it.
Yeah.
Rack and pinion steering.
Yeah.
Took out the shock towers to put in a modern front suspension, and he drives it and shows it, and it still looks like a 70 Mustang, but when you start looking at it, you know, and of course the Ring brothers, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ring brothers, who really took it to another level, maybe 20 years ago now, but a while back, they really got a lot of attention with their Restomod style Mustangs. And we still, you know, go to the Mustang Club of America shows, which is very well known for originality, but there are a lot of Restomods show up, especially on the West Coast. Yeah. And more so on the West Coast than the East Coast.
Yeah, look, I love the Restomod thing. I you know, in the bike world, you know, there's a lot of gorgeous bikes over time that you'd love to have in terms of having a classic bike. Cars are the same, but I want something I can drive and enjoy as well, you know, regardless of its value. So I don't have a problem with the Restomods. There's some really amazing stuff out there.
Yeah, and they seem to be holding their values, at least the ones that are very well done. I was over at the Mecum auction back in January, and it looked like the Restomods were going for as much money, generally over 100 grand, as some Shelbys. So they're hanging in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of collectors, if you were gonna, let's say you were going to give some coaching on collecting to sort of a newbie to collecting, but has some resources, maybe not the Steve Mcqueen sort of resources or the Snake, but you know, money to get into it, and they want to start it as a passion. What's maybe the handful of cars they ought to be looking at that aren't just super crazy expensive, but they have some value?
And I think it will differ by the person. I think it's better to start with a car or cars, maybe start with a car if you want to at the beginning, that you connect to from why you got interested in these cars in the first place. Maybe it's one you own, maybe it's one your neighbor owned, maybe it's one your high school buddy owned and took you for a ride in. And you know, that seems to be what gets a lot of people started collecting, is they want to go back and get one that they used to own or knew about, and then from there you can either stick to a theme like a model year or a generation or a muscle version or whatever, but just get the cars that you like. You know, if from the emotional standpoint, from a financial standpoint, I guess you look at the cars that hold their value, are gaining in value. Yeah,
and that's a great point. I mean, really across all collectibles, people ask me that question all the time. Well, you know, what should I focus on? And my answer is always the same. What gets you going? You know, what ticks the boxes for you? Because if you combine that to going out and finding a few smart buys, then the hook really gets set and it becomes a real passion. So, but that's good advice for a starting point. What's your favorite Mustang of all time?
Oh, it would have to be the car that got me going on all this, the Boss 302, the 70 Boss 302. Just from the first time I saw one, saw those stripes, spoilers, you know, my first car was a 70 Fastback, just a plain Jane. And from that moment on, I knew I had to get a Boss 302. And 74, I finally traded the little sport, the plain Jane for a Boss 302. And I still, you know, I've got some die casts laying around, and I can't, every time I run across one of a Boss 302 at 70 in particular, I just have to stop and admire those stripes. Larry Shinoda just did, you know, to think that he was able to get those stripes on a car, that, you know, just probably the making of them, the paint on the hood, just all that had to be done to finish off the cars.
It's auto art. I mean,
time is money in the assembly plant. So, but he managed to do it, and they still get my attention.
Your favorite story that you've covered to date? Favorite article you've written? Favorite car? Or favorite collection? Or what's your favorite story in a career of stories?
Well, that one about Dr. Mansell and his Magic Skyway car was definitely one. And it seems like my favorites always come from the early era, but I was able to hear about, through a friend of mine who's also a journalist, a lady near Chicago who had on April 15th, 1964, she had just graduated from college, just got her first job as a school teacher. And she, her dad took her to buy her first car. And she all she knew is she wanted a convertible. So she went to Johnson Ford in Chicago, and the salesman said, "We don't have any convertibles on the lot, but there's something out back I need to show you." And he took her back there, and there was a skylight blue Mustang convertible that was destined to be, you know, one of their first Mustang display cars.
Wow.
And she told him she wanted it. He sold it to her on the spot. And she drove out of the dealership 2 days before the Mustang went on sale.
Wow.
As the only person in Chicago, and maybe in America, maybe even in the world, with a Mustang. And she tells the story how she felt like a movie star, and people were stopping her to ask her about this car. And Ford has recognized her as the first person to buy a Mustang in the United States. There might be one earlier in Canada.
I read that story recently. I love it. It's fantastic.
Well, it's in AARP magazine this month.
Okay.
She got in there. But what makes it even better is that they kept the car, she and her husband. She wanted to get rid of it. He wanted to keep it to restore it. Took him 24 years, I think. Wow. And he did restore it. So not only is she the first person to buy a Mustang, she is the person who has owned a Mustang longer than anyone else. Wow. So, and she is a wonderful lady. Her and her husband's wonderful too, and just a great ambassador to Mustang.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's one maybe needs to be in the museum at some point, right?
It was there. It had a 6-month run. In fact, the last time I saw Tommy and Gail Wise was her name. I saw them just a couple of months ago up at what they call Mustang Day festivities.
Well, I'd love to hear more of that story. I have to find out a way to make that a podcast in the future, but
I can hook you up with Gail.
Awesome. All right. EV, tell us where your head is on EV, where Mustang's going with EV, and what sort of the Mustang community thinks about an EV Mustang.
Well, I can tell you right off the bat that most of the Mustang community is not very happy about Ford's decision to shape the vehicle like a Mustang, call it a Mustang.
Yeah.
Because you get down to the brass nuts, it's not a Mustang. It's a all new special purpose all electric vehicle, and it's an SUV with 4 doors. So it really doesn't have anything to do with the Mustang. Ford's decision to call it a Mustang was obviously based on marketing.
Yeah.
And it's really, even though they're getting a lot of pushback from the Mustang community, I think it was just a brilliant marketing decision. They took a car that was just gonna, an SUV that was just gonna be lost among all the other new SUVs coming out.
Yeah.
And they generated a spark by calling it Mustang, and made it even look better by making it look like a Mustang. So, you know, I heard they're sold out for this year.
Wow.
So it's obviously doing well. Me personally, I wouldn't mind owning one day when the infrastructure is there.
Sure. Have you seen any cool EV type Restomods? Did I lose you? We had a little blip there.
Actually, it's interesting. I was out at a Mustang Club of America National in California last month, and for the first time, Mach-E's entered a Mustang Club of America ship. 2 of them were stock, and they were in the display class, but somebody entered a modified.
Yeah.
He autocrosses it and does open track with it.
Wow.
So he had done some modifications. I didn't get to talk to him about what he had done to the car, but he's definitely out there using it like a normal Mustang person would.
Right. It's you know, the power, the immediate torque. I mean, it's instant. I'm an old school guy. I love the sounds. I love the smells. The petrol. You know, I love the tangible physical experience. But you know, I've had time on an EV motorcycle. Owned an EV car for a little while, and I tell you what, they go. They go.
Yeah, I haven't driven a Mach-E, but the guys over at Dream Giveaway, I was over there doing a story on one of their giveaway Mustangs, and they had a Tesla, and we went out in it and just stopped, put it in ludicrous mode, let off the brake, punched the gas, but punched the accelerator.
Yeah.
And it was like Star Trek warp speed.
It's crazy, right?
Unreal.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a pleasure to have you on. I know you're busy, always got a lot of writing to do. I have to say, it was a joy many years ago. Good night. Had to be in the 90s, right? When I was doing some youth work down there, and we did a little a contest, a scavenger hunt. And one of the items on the scavenger hunt was making our way to your little red Mustang and driving it. My team was the only one that did.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
I forgot about that.
You still have that car? You still have that car?
Was that the Fox body, or was it a 66?
So. Yeah. I think it was a 66.
That was probably it. That is when I told you about the my grandfather buying a brand new 66 Mustang.
Yeah.
That is that car.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I found it for sale up in my hometown back in the early 80s.
Oh, wow.
And I still own it today. So
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would have been the car. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I can appreciate that more now than I ever would have back then.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, look, thank you for sharing the stories. It's been amazing, and thank you for the insight. And we'll do it again, and I'll probably reach out to you and ask you to connect me to some more Mustang storytelling through Gail.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Have a great day. Appreciate it.
You too. Thank you much.
Donald Farr, the Don of the Mustang world. Thank you, Don. Take care.